I'm excited. You know, when the Indian brothers and sisters first asked to get into Revelation, I was like, oh my goodness, okay. You guys don't know what you're asking. And then as I've just been reading and studying, and I've never been this excited when I've read the Revelation before. And it starts right away in Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. Reading Revelation is supposed to be a blessing. This concept of blessing is so important in the book that it says it again at the very end in Revelation 22:7. Jesus says, behold, I am coming soon. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book. If you are not blessed when you are studying this book, you're doing it wrong. It should not make you fearful or worried or anxious. Revelation has always been a source of debate and confusion within the church. It was the last book accepted into the Bible, and even from time to time over the centuries, people have talked about taking it out because it has been used to justify so much bad theology. Because as scholarship and knowledge moved, we had trouble understanding it. Some were so confused by it, they ignored entirely and missed the blessing. And so one of my goals over the next, well, I wrote down weeks, but I'm pretty sure it'll be months as we go through this, is to help you have a good filter through which to read it. Some weeks I will bring handouts. They'll be back on the back. I'll include them in the message notes that go out each week. So if you didn't get one of the note handouts and you want them, you can grab one now or you can get them after service. Because of all the confusion that surrounds this book, I'm going to go through it slowly. Most weeks I will pause for questions, and if I don't get to your question, please write it down, because I guarantee someone else has the same question, and they would appreciate the clarification. And some who read it wrong, well, they're trying to deceive. They are against Christ, and they want to confuse, worry, and separate people so that they will be destroyed. And those kinds of people are followers of Satan, and 1 John calls them antichrists. But most people who read it wrong are well-meaning. They're just confused. Because this genre of literature is not normal for most of us. So we don't know how to read it. And this might surprise you, but I struggle to read poetry. It's not something I do in my regular day. Because I'm much more comfortable with an operations manual than a poem. I prefer things in black and white. But I'm learning. I'm exercising my imagination, which is something that Revelation is going to call us to do. And so I have a poem today that captures this idea. It's called Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins. I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with a rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Now, if you're not used to reading poetry, this probably sounds pretty strange. I mean, how do you drop a mouse into a poem and watch it probe its way out? It's not supposed to be read literally, but figuratively. It's supposed to inspire our imagination. When we say things like water ski across the surface of the poem, you can picture that in your head, just kind of gliding along, going with the flow. In many ways, we have weak imaginations. We are so connected to the mundane tasks of surviving. Do I have enough food on the table? Will my paycheck last? I have illness in my family. That we struggle to get our heads up and imagine. And in many ways, science has also limited our imagination by telling us we should only accept what we can see and touch. Yet we still get it. When we read something like this poem causes you to imagine something. There was a phrase or two in there that you connected with. And if you exercise those intellectual muscles regularly, you would connect with even more of those. Poetry and literature, like Revelation, is designed to wake up our imagination. It enables us to see our present moment in history from a divine perspective. And the first mistake that many make in studying Revelation is to ignore the imagination. We instead try to tie Revelation to a chair and torture out the one true meaning of the symbols and the metaphors that it uses. And some of the symbols and language in Revelation is just crazy. And I want to kind of get this idea to you through a couple of pictures. Now, if you looked at this picture, think for a moment in your head, what is this picture talking about? I'm going to be really impressed if any of you get it. You know? I think so. Oh, okay, I'm going to be impressed. Oh my gosh. He killed it. England and the War of the Roses. Absolutely. Anybody else pick up on that? Like I had just read a book on it, and so I'm like, this is great. So England is often shown as an old oak tree, stout and sturdy and far-reaching. The Lancasters were white roses, represented by the lion. The House of York was the red rose and the fox. You see the crown down on the floor because over just a couple of decades, multiple people took the crown by force and were pulling the country apart. And then you have all the little animals representing the other houses and just the regular people. But if you don't have that context, you just kind of look at it and go, And imagine then if somebody told you, well, you have to figure it out. You have to decide what it means. And there's another picture that would probably make a little bit more sense to you. All right? We're American. So we get this. What's the donkey? Democrats. Yep. What's the elephant? Republicans. Okay, you see the little bit of Declaration of Independence in the back? What's the snake thing? You don't get to talk yet. Anybody remember that one besides Troy? Troy, what's the snake? Yeah, an old political cartoon. Like if you see it again, you'd be like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that in my textbooks. So even though you knew most of the symbols, there were still some of them that you would have had to go, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure about that one. And what often happens is if we don't know, we guess. And maybe the guess is right, maybe the guess is wrong. The guess can be very well-meaning, but it's still just a guess. Excuse me. Just as the key to understanding this picture is understanding American culture and history, understanding Israelite culture and history is the key to understanding Revelation. It has more references to the Old Testament than the rest of the New Testament combined. It assumes that you know the Old Testament so well that you're going to notice this. It rarely quotes it directly. It just says something that's a connected phrase, a connected metaphor. He doesn't come out and says, well, Isaiah said, or the prophet said. He just expects you to pick up on it. It's like somebody, I had a college friend that had never seen the Star Wars movies before. And so she missed out on a lot of my jokes, as opposed to somebody that has seen Star Wars over and over and over and over again and probably doesn't even need the movies to quote all of it. You pick up on different nuance. And so that's John's expectation, is that you know the Old Testament so well, you're going to pick up on all of these. And if you don't feel like that's you, that's okay. I don't. That's why I study others and I read others so they can help and point out where all of these connections are. And so one thing that I will be doing a lot is pointing out where in the Old Testament the ideas in Revelation are found and how John is using them, how he often will repurpose them to communicate more clearly to that first century audience and to us today. Because Revelation is the culmination of 5 different stories, 5 different narratives from the Old Testament. Number 1 is creation and recreation. God has remained faithful despite all of our rebellion, and he will bring all of creation to its proper end, heaven and earth together, where humanity lives with God in harmony and joy. He started that in Genesis, and he's still working on it. Number 2 is redemption. Just as God redeemed the Israelite people from Egypt through the Exodus, Jesus has bought us, has redeemed us with his blood, and we are finally freed of sin and all of its effects in the fulfilled creation, in that final recreation. We see judgment, that our righteous God will destroy evil. It will not go unpunished. We see the idea of a faithful witness. Faithful people continue to bear witness until the very end, despite intense opposition and persecution. That was Abraham's role. That was Moses' role. That was the Israelite role, and that role that has been spread to us to be a witness of our Lord. And number 5, victory. Despite the opposition and persecution, the church will triumph with Jesus, the Lamb of God, who has taken away the sins of the world and who is our victorious King. And because the book is intentionally symbolic, it leaves lots of room for how this is going to happen. Different interpretations are okay. John wrote it so that the ideas here could bless those in the 1st century in Asia Minor, as well as Americans and my Indian brothers today, and everyone in between, whether England in the War of the Roses or any other place in time in history. People from every generation have noticed the similarities between their lives and Revelation. And so we have to guard against the idea that it was written only for us and only for our time, because that's the second big mistake. Revelation is only for us today. Now, the people last generation, they thought that. They thought it was only for them because that they were going to be the last generation. They were obviously wrong because we're all here. We, however, are right. We are in the last of the last days, and it was only written for us in our time, right? Unfortunately, that is what some do. They teach that this book is only, or at least primarily, for us in our time because we are the last generation. And while I absolutely agree we are in the last days, I disagree with how they teach the concept. And disagreement on what Revelation means is okay. We can and should find unity, continue to be unified even when we disagree. Problems come when Christians divide because we do not have the same interpretation, the same understanding of Revelation. And when we divide like that, we're not reflecting the heart of Jesus. When we condemn those who disagree with us, we are so worried about the speck in their eye, the way they view the symbols, that we're ignoring the log of condemnation in our own. I love the way many who believe we are the final generation focus so heavily on Jesus. I'm happy to discuss my concerns about their views, and I'll share some of them as we go, but they should be conversations between brothers, not arguments between enemies. And the different views of Revelation, they fall on a continuum based on your answers to 2 questions. Question 1, when do the events of Revelation occur? And question 2, is the text more a code to be deciphered or a lens to see the world? How you answer these 2 questions will set your direction for interpreting the symbols. And it is also why there is so much diversity in interpretation. Again, God-loving, wonderful Christians come to very different conclusions, and it is healthy to talk with people who have a different view than your own, than my own. It helps us sharpen and clarify our thinking on why we draw certain conclusions, and often we may even learn something new that helps us change our doctrine and be more like Christ. And this teaching and the conversations that we're going to have through it is one way that we're going to do that. And I'm going to do my best to present different views and why people believe them, but I will spend most of my time on what I think, because I'm the one with the microphone. After many years of study and going through it again and again, now with you has helped me understand Revelation more. And I want you guys to ask questions. You're going to have things that you already believe. Awesome. I want to hear them. You're going to disagree with me. Wonderful. I want you to ask questions. I want you to point out the problems. Because I'll tell you, I've changed on where I fall on this. I was first taught that this was almost all in the future, and that the symbols were John's understanding of modern day things. And I believed, like many, that this was primarily written for us today because we are the last generation. In fact, one pastor taught me that in Revelation 9, which speaks of locusts with human faces and tails of scorpions, that's actually a description of modern day attack helicopters. And that was the first time I questioned that, Pastor. Like, really? I don't see that. I don't get that. But in his mind, an attack helicopter from John was so bizarre, that was the best language he had to describe it. That seems kind of crazy to me. And so where I was for a long time was really trying to decipher it as a code, and that it was 100% in the future. It caused me to stop reading Revelation at one point because it was confusing. And honestly, I was hearing crazy things. And so I just blindly accepted that my pastors knew what they were talking about, and I went along with it. And while he was trustworthy, and I am trustworthy, please think these things through and ask questions. Years later, as I've come back to this book as a mature Christian, I discovered the beauty of this book, and I see the strength and the weaknesses in all the different views, and now my view looks more like this. I believe Revelation provides symbols that can be applied to every generation of believers. One example is the great city. It's a phrase that you'll hear, especially towards the end of the book. It is the capital of the oppressors and the source of much of the evil in the world. It is enemy HQ. In the book of Revelation, it is most commonly called Babylon, especially in Revelation 18. Yet in 11:8, the same city is called Sodom and Egypt and even Jerusalem. And in Revelation 17, it's called Rome as well. Because this symbol, the great city of evil, is meant to remind us that rebellion against God occurs in every generation around the world. America and India could be included in the symbol of the great city where Christians are persecuted. We are not alone. Christians throughout history, now and into the future, have all experienced persecution. They have struggled with a world that is actively opposed to them. And we can see our struggles in the symbols of a Revelation with a little bit of decoding. And when we see that, it helps us see our life through a different lens. And it should bring us hope that God is always with us. He was always with the church. He will always be with the church, and he will always win. And that is a source of blessing and hope. One of the reasons I view Revelation as a symbolic way to encourage every generation is the genre of the book. Now, genre is the type of book that it is. Genre determines the basis of language and how we interpret it. If I say, put the mouse on the table, it means very different things if it's in a computer textbook or a veterinary textbook. And so knowing the genre, what kind of thing it is, helps us understand meaning. And many people think Revelation mostly deals with the future because they think it is in the genre of prophecy. And in English, we often think prophecy means to tell the future. So we read the blessings with this verse in mind. Blessed is the one who reads aloud. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of the prophecy. So to get the promised blessing, I got to keep the prophecy. Well, that means I first have to figure out the prophecy, right? Because if I don't figure out the prophecy, I'm going to miss the blessing. I can relate Revelation to my time, so it must have been prophesying about my time. And so if I just compare what I see in the news and on the internet, I can figure it out and I can get the blessing. Well, the problem with that is that prophecy is not primarily or even mostly about telling the future. In the Old Testament, it has this idea a little bit, but it's mostly a reminder to be faithful It's a reminder of our faithfulness and our failure and our call to be faithful to God. Think of the prophet Nathan confronting David after he committed adultery and murder. Think of Samuel chastising Saul and the nation. You know what you're supposed to do it. That is what a prophecy is. And for the unfaithful, it's a reminder to them of the punishment that was coming if they did not change. Isaiah, Ezekiel, and the other prophets would call the Gentile nations, even the chosen nation of Israel, into God's courtroom. They would lay out the facts of their rebellion and the consequences that await them. Prophecy is primarily a divine reminder to be faithful to our role as imagers. Now, the difference with God and what some people see is that God always tells the truth. The Greek word for prophecy continues this idea from the Old Testament, this divinely inspired word. It could be predicting the future, but that's not its primary purpose. And John goes a step further into a special kind of prophecy, an apocalypse. And we don't really have a modern genre that's similar to that. We'll read some examples in the book of Daniel and Isaiah and other spots in the Bible as the genre was being developed. And there are other examples of this genre outside of the Bible that you can go and read, but we haven't really studied them a whole lot in the church history until the last 100 years or so. The Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran really brought this genre to the forefront. The book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, the Testament of Moses, the Apocalypse of Abraham are just a few apocalypses that were written around the same time as John, where we can now have a better understanding of what this genre means. So here's an example of a passage from 1st Enoch, and you're going to see that the language is very similar to Revelation. 1st Enoch 14, and I went in until I drew closer to a wall which is built of crystals and surrounded by tongues of fire, and it began to scare me. And I entered into the house, and it was hot as fire and cold as ice. There were no delights of life in it. Fear covered me, and trembling got hold of me, and I beheld and saw a lofty throne. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels as the shining sun, and there was the vision of cherubim. And that could have come right out of the book of Revelation with how he's describing things. So if Revelation is the only example of the apocalypse you will read, you will not be able to understand it fully because you don't understand how the genre works. Imagine if you went to a Savannah Bananas baseball game. Excuse me, it's a banana ball game. But you don't have any experience with regular baseball. And then you go to a Cardinals game. Where are the backflips? Where are the dances? How come the umpire's not twerking? And so when you understand the way it's supposed to work, it helps you put all of those things in its proper place. And that's why we rely on scholars who do the work and share it with us. Because while I like to study, I don't know that I want to spend a whole lot of time reading the apocalypses from the Second Temple period. So here are just some of the features of the apocalypse prophecy. They express and create hope. It should make us optimistic, not pessimistic. It is a harsh critique of the oppressors. They recognize who's doing the wrong, and they tell them that. It's a passionate exhortation for defiance. Stand up and tell the man what you think. A lot of the other apocalypses, they talk about it with violence. As you read Revelation, look for the violence. Look for how Christians show defiance without violence. There's an unfailing confidence in God's ultimate defeat of evil. It's usually articulated in symbolic and even in cryptic language. And I want to be clear about this. Just because something is symbolic does not make it less real. The goal is to experience the emotion more than impart information. It's the language of resistance. So there is a part of it that's spoken in code. I remember reading The Tale of Two Cities. And in the second chapter, I think, it starts going Jacques, 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 Jacques. And I remember my English teacher asking me, well, who's Jacques? And I'm like, some French dude? I don't know. There was like 8 of them. She's like, no, don't you get it? That's the French resistance. They called everybody Jacques, so you couldn't know, you had to be in the know to understand it. Oh, I missed that. It reveals the unseen truth of present realities. We see that God is enthroned and that the enemy is fighting a losing battle. It reveals an unseen future reality, such as judgment and salvation. It recognizes the imposing forces of the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of earth, both historically and ethically. Both doing the right thing in your daily life and making the right choices, and recognizing when there is opposition, organized opposition against the kingdom of God. It recognizes that there is a present age and an age to come, a present age that's characterized by evil and injustice and persecution and oppression and rebellion against God, and an age to come characterized by goodness and justice and peace. And again, the goal is not imparting information, but to help us experience what the prophet, in this case John, experienced. It wants you to feel. And when we get so caught up in the minutia, we miss the feeling. We miss the blessedness. We're doing it wrong. When we recognize these things, when we recognize these features of apocalyptic prophecy, we can avoid some of the common pitfalls and misunderstandings in Revelation. And so as you study it, as you read it on your own during the week, here are some common mistakes and how to avoid them. Number one is failure to understand apocalyptic literature. Okay, review these characteristics above and remember that it is designed to make us feel hope and warn us to remain faithful. That is its primary purpose, to feel hope and remain faithful. We try to define meaning for the symbols outside of the first century. Hate to break it to you, there's no attack helicopters in Revelation. We want to look to the first century in Asia Minor for what they intended, for what John was thinking about, and what that communicated to that original group, because that helps us understand the principle. How are we supposed to be applying it? Number three is assuming everything will be literally fulfilled today. I am looking for a one world kingdom. I'm looking for a big leader that will die and come back, that will be the Antichrist. Understanding, again, the symbols of the first century helps us to see analogies to today, not literal fulfillment. There are no attack helicopters. A third common mistake is treating it like a code. It's not meant to be a secret. It's not a challenge that if you were just smarter or if you were more spiritual, you could figure it out. Don't you want to be part of the special in crowd that figures out exactly what it means and exactly when Christ is coming back? We've seen that throughout the ages. We've seen it in our generations. These pastors, often cult leaders, that will rise up and say, it's going to happen on this date. Oh, I did the math wrong. It's going to happen on this date. Sorry about that. I missed it. And they attract people because don't you want to be part of the in crowd? Don't you want to be recognized as smarter and more spiritual than everyone else? It's not defining an in crowd. It's supposed to be understood by every believer. Another mistake is obsessing on the less significant parts of the book. For example, the millennium is a source of a lot of debate, but it's only described in 4 verses. All of these thousands and thousands of pages about the millennium, 4 verses. I think we might be missing the forest for the trees there. Focus on the big themes of hope and perseverance through persecution and final victory. And then the final pitfall is focusing on the interpretation of one person, especially modern interpreters. I know what David Jeremiah says about it. I know what John MacArthur says about it. I know what Joyce Meyer, Michael Pippin, or Troy Wohlers, or I'm just going to go with whatever they say. The most popular view in America that has been spread through missionaries is called dispensationalism. It breaks all of these rules. They're the ones who often see attack helicopters. The church has a long relationship with Revelation, and we need to look at the entire tradition for guidance on what it means. If you are stuck in an echo chamber where all you're hearing is people who agree with you and your view, I'm going to really encourage you to start reading others, to start listening to others, because you'll find that there's problems with every single view. And we want to find out what God is telling us. And he's telling us that we're blessed through this prophecy. He's telling us we should be experiencing hope. So we've talked through a lot, and we haven't actually started the book yet. I promise next week we get to verse 1.